All right, so I was saying, a good night of Shabbos. So first of all, Yeshikach to Reb Tzvi. I always say, it gets a real interest every single week. Such a beautiful Reb Tzvi. Thank you so very much.
The weeks that we're on.
The weeks that we're on, yeah. All right, God, it's 1 week. It's part of next week. It's not. It's Hashem. It's Hashem. But Yeshikach, thank you, and it was so wonderful to have Rebelli here. But so you have to admit, the truth is, if one had to paint a picture as to what Erev Shabbos looks like, I think this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. For Yidden to be together, to learn Torah, to sing together, to make a l'chaim together, to bring in Shabbos just a little bit earlier. Not to wait till the 18 minutes, but already to begin Thursday night, to be able to be Mosif on the Kiddush of Shabbos is such an incredible schus. And I will say the only thing that can make it better is that we have the schus to learn the Heilige Torah of the Chalban. So we're going to continue Mirza Hashem tonight. I definitely ran off more copies, more sheets, I should say, than what we're going to learn. We're not going to get through all that. I think if one thing that we've seen from the Chalban is that it's slow going. In other words, everything just takes time. And again, the idea is, although the wording, they say in Hebrew, the gibush ra'ayonot, the articulation of the ideas sometimes seems simple. We delve a little bit more into it. There's something so profound, something so beautiful. It's mamish Mashiach Torah. So we'll say with that, let's begin. So we're beginning on page Nun Hey. On page Nun Hey. I'm sorry? Because Mashiach hasn't taken so long. So it makes sense that the limud of Mashiach takes so long also. It's true. Okay, so we'll say, so with that, page Nun Hey. So let's begin. So writes the Chalban as follows. V'hinei, Iker Torah fa'hevdel ben agolus u'ben ageula hu b'sod hadas. So we've seen this already a couple of times, that the fundamental difference, one thing that Chalban has really highlighted over here, is that the fundamental distinction between Golus and between Geula is in Das, is in the way we understand things, right? That's one of the things that's become most profound is, I think before we started learning the Chalban, so we often thought that the fundamental essence of Golus was a geographic one, right? Geula means I'm in Eretz Yisrael, Golus means I'm in Chutz La'aretz. But what the Chalban has taught us is that the real profundity in Golus lies in the fact that our perception of everything is different. Our perception of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our perception of Torah, our perception of Am Yisrael, our perception of our own personal mission, everything is fundamentally different in Golus. Das shel Geula, mol das shel Golus. There's Geula das, and there's Golus das. There's Golus das. Shusod mochin de gadlus, mul mochin de katnus. We'll say, in the Zohar, you see this in Chassidus all the time, mochin de gadlus versus mochin de katnus, which for our purposes we'll call it being large-minded versus being small-minded. And I will say, even if you think about this in terms of how the Chalban started, I don't know how long we've been doing this Sefer. It feels like a long time. I don't think it's been all that long. But remember, when we first started, the whole Yisod the Chalban pointed out was that the fundamental difference between Galus and Geula is that in Galus, the focus is on the self. And remember, said the Chalban, not like in a selfish way, not like I only care about me. But if you ask a Galus Jew, what's your job in this world? What is a Galus Jew going to say? What is he going to say? Be the best me. Right? We speak about this all the time. Become the best version of yourself. And that's beautiful, by the way. But says the Chalban, that's Galus. You ask a Geula Jew, what's your tachlis? Machal vasa ba'olamecha, machal v'secha ba'olamecha. What's your job? What is the Geula Jew going to answer? To be a part of the klal. To be part of the klal. That my goal, my essence is to be a limb of the body. The Galus Jew is a limb. The Geula Jew is part of the body. It's part of the body. So the Chalban calls that it's a distinction between being small-minded versus large-minded, right? Small-minded versus. I will say, by the way, which one is better? Mochin de gadlus, mochin de katnus. So the first one. It's often right. So it's often tempting to say, of course, mochin de gadlus, geula. So I'll say, remember. when it comes to these things, it's not a shaila of, right? Really, the answer is yes. Right? It's not a shaila of which one's better, which one's worse. They're just two fundamentally different statements. It's kind of like, when you're a child, you could have an argument, which is better, vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream, right? And then as you get older, what do you realize? Right? Ice cream, right? Ice cream. As you get older, you realize, I'll eat anything, right? So as I get older, I realize the truth is, it's not a machlokes. They're two dissimilar things. In other words, it's not a machlokes which is better, chocolate or vanilla. They're two different things. Well, what's better, Tuesdays or Wednesdays? It's two different things. So we'll say, so to a certain degree, what we call the mochin de gadlus, mochin de katnus, the das of geula, the das of galus, they're just two different animals. They're two fundamentally different things. He goes on, v'hainu sha'af sha'hevdal hanikar hu b'chitzonios sha'galus hi yitzia min ha'aretz u'pizar ha'am mikol makom zeu hashinu b'tzot hachitzonios. So I will say, this is what we were just saying before. The Chalban says very often, when it comes to galus and geula, we focused on the external distinctions between galus and geula. What's galus? Galus is the departure from Eretz Yisrael, pizur ha'am, and dispersion of the Jewish people. But says the Chalban, that's chitzonius, right? Right, not being in Eretz Yisrael, that's true. It's painful. But that's an external thing. The fact that Klal Yisrael is dispersed, that's an external thing. The ikar pnimius umalchus hahevdal be'etzem hanafashos umadrigosam v'hainu b'sod hadash shalahim. I will say this is so profound. The Chalban says, at the end of the day, the real distinction between galus and geula fundamentally lies in das. Right? In the das, there's a different das in galus. There's a different das in geula. There's just a fundamentally different das. And again, that goes back to what we said before. The way we view ourselves, the way we view HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way we view Torah, everything is fundamentally different in galus versus geula. So what's so profound about this is, I think more often than not, we're fully focused on the chitzonius, right? We're fully focused ultimately again on the external distinctions, right? You ask a Jew, what's galus? Galus is not being in Eretz Yisrael. Galus is Klal Yisrael scattered. The Chalban says, yeah, that's true, but that's not the essence. The essence of galus is my neshama is different. The essence of galus is my Torah is different. The essence of galus is my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is different. Everything is fundamentally different. And so the Rebbe goes on, he says, Gam nekudas hahevdel hamahusis bein madregas Eretz Yisrael l'chutz Eretz Yisrael. Rebbe say, just like you ask someone, what's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and chutz la'aretz? What's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and Baltimore? What's the difference? What's the difference? So he'll say, so first of all, in Eretz Yisrael, things are open after 9 o'clock, right? That's number one, right? He'll say, but listen to this. He says, Gam nukudas hahevdel. What's the essence of the difference between Eretz Yisrael and Galus? He says, she'eretz Yisrael hi makom das Elokim emes. So we'll say, you ask people, what's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and chutz la'aretz. So of course, again, on one level, of course, Eretz Yisrael has the Mekomos HaKadoshim, the Kosel, Marsa Machpelah, Kever Rachel, Tzfas, all these wonderful places. That's external. That's external. The real distinction is Himakom Das Elokim Emes. I will say, you know what the real distinction is? That Eretz Yisrael is the place where you can truly and fully come to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can you come to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Chutz La'aretz? Can you? Yeah. Of course. Can you fully come to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We'll say, you know what it's like? It's like the chilik between engagement and marriage. Right? When you're engaged to someone, right? Let's say you've been dating that person for a long time. You think you know them. And you do. You know many, many, many things about them. But it's in a doma, that level of knowledge you have with that spouse once marriage occurs than before marriage. No matter, you could have been engaged for 5 years. Right? Lamaisa, there's just a difference. That's Galus and Geula. The way I know HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Galus could be so beautiful and so fantastic and so happy and so special. But it's not the same as Eretz Yisrael.
You shouldn't use the word, excuse me, but the word fully. I mean, know God. That's impossible.
No, I remember that's what the Chalban is saying. Is that whatever fully means, whatever fully in accordance with our ability to fully know God.
We're unable.
Whatever it means in the shleimus of our knowledge, whatever that level is that we're able to attain it in the time of Geula. Lachein. Ba'ovdan hadas as Hashem ba'agalos. Say Rabbosai, here's what's fascinating. Therefore, again, when the ability to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately dissipated, ba'agalos. So Rabbosai, this is actually also very interesting. The interesting part we're going to talk about over here is kind of the way in which what the progression is. See, the Chalban posits that at the end of the day, the first step to Galus is not physical dispersion. The first step of Galus is the loss of relationship. There's a loss of relationship. Ba'ovdan hadas es Hashem. I don't know HaKadosh Baruch Hu as I once did. Then Galus comes. Machmas choser hashaychos hapenimis lemadregas Eretz Yisrael. And I will say, we're going to talk about this now, we're going to get into this a little bit more, but the Chalban's making two major points here. Point number one is that the fundamental distinction between Galus and Geula is not manifest in the external distinctions that we often focus on. Rather, the fundamental difference in Galus and Geula is manifest ultimately again in what? In the internal piece, in the ability to know Hashem. I know Hashem differently in Galus than I do in Geula. It's just fundamentally different. Just, by the way, we're looking for a knife sponsor, plastic knife sponsor for next week's share. I want to tell you, this has been like an experiment in human behavior for me. Because I dafka don't put out, I'm very curious. By the way, you've all failed miserably, right? Mamish, like, who's going to break first and actually go and either, Adam David, Nebuch, like, you're using two forks. This is like a third world country. I was like, brother, exactly. If we would get a committee of women, there'd be China, there'd be linen, there'd be service. Yeah. Okay. Right. We're eating with three forks, right? Until we give up and just tear it apart with our hands. It's incredible. All right. So therefore, again, it's very true. So the Chalban says that the real essence of Geula is the ability to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a deeper level. And I both say the next part he says something very interesting. So how does Galus occur? Galus occurs, the first step of Galus is what he calls Machmas Choser Hashaychos Hapnimis Lemadregas Eretz Yisrael. The first step of Galus is not physical dispersion. The first step of Galus ultimately is we stop knowing God. It's like any relationship, right? The first step when the relationship begins to decompose is not when I physically distance myself. The first step is when, again, the relationship begins to thaw and the parties begin to distance themselves a little bit from one another, not even geographically, just emotionally. Ha'uvda, shadasi nekudas hayesod behevdol ben galus legula, mevu'eres biksuvim. The Chalban writes, this idea that the fundamental distinction between galus and geula lies not in geography, but rather, again, lies in das, in the way we understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, is in the Psukim, Ka'omro, quotes the pasuk from Yeshaya, Lachin Gala Ami Mibli Das. Therefore, again, my nation has been exiled. And how does the Navi refer to Klal Yisrael? Mibli Das. They don't have Das. We'll say, what does that mean? They lost the intimacy in their relationship. They lost the closeness. Right? They lost that connection. Galus begins when there's a rupturing of das of Klal Yisrael. Ki ikar hagalus benefilas hadas lekatnus umemela ba'a bekvoseha gam nedidas haguf. Ultimately, I will say this is very profound. See, the Chalban says Galus began for our ancestors when they were still in Eretz Yisrael. See, I will say we often think, when did Galus begin? Okay, so in the first Beis HaMikdash, it was when Nebuchadnezzar let us out of Eretz Yisrael. And in the second Beis HaMikdash, it was when the Romans, also let us out. Chazal says it's not true. Galus actually began already while we were still living in the land. Galus already began while we were still firmly situated in Eretz Yisrael. Because when did Galus really begin? Benefilas hadas lekatnos. When we become so small in the way we know Hashem, when we become so small in the way we know ourselves, and when we become so small in the way that we know our fellow members of Klal Yisrael, when there's katnos hadas, that's galus, which I will say is an overwhelming thing, because what it means is geographically you could be where you're supposed to be, but emotionally, cognitively, spiritually, if I'm not up to par, then I'm in galus. You could be in Eretz Yisrael, and you could be in galus. He goes on.
How does he tie the two things together then? There was before we were saying about how galus is a function of yourself versus Gula is a function of being part of the cloud. So it seems, but now we're saying that it's das, which seems to be very individualistic.
It's all the same thing. In other words, he's going to tie it together, but essentially what we're going to see is like this in the Chalban's model. When you have Geula Das, and you have this tfisa on who HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, and what Torah is, and what Ruchnius is, the natural progression of that is Klal Yisrael. Is an achdus b'Klal Yisrael. So again, he didn't spell out the progression yet. We're going to get to it, hopefully tonight. Emir Tzashem.
Is the Nefilas Hadas, is that the catalyst or is that the result?
Oh, so this is incredible. So that's a good question. The Chalban says it's the catalyst. He says, Galus, see, remember again, what the Chalban is doing here is, he's highlighting two different frameworks of Galus. There's Galus Chitzoni, and there's Galus Pnimi. There's external Galus, there's internal Galus, right? External Galus is dispersion from the land. But what he's positing is, when does external Galus occur? External Galus is the result. What is it the result of? Galus Pnimi. And what's Galus Pnimi? Nefilas Hadas. When I lose my das. I lose my das.
Does it happen automatically itself? Or
no, so that goes back to then the Gemaras that talk about why Klal Yisrael lost the Beis Hamikdash. So that could be again, Gila Araya, Shlichus Dam Avodah Zara, Sinas Chinam. So correct. When we're going to see what the Chalban is going to say is, when we engage in systemic, erroneous, spiritually undermining behavior, you lose your das. And then correct, the result of egregious anti-spiritual behavior is a loss of das. Correct. And by the way, I just want to point out, if you look, correct, that is correct. And then again, the loss of das is then the catalyst for physical dispersion. So what's so overwhelming about this is, we always focus on galus as the galus chitzoni, as the exile from the land. And what the Chalban is introducing us to is this incredibly different way of looking at galus, that fundamentally it's not about the dispersion from land. That's the result. It's really about the Nefilas Das. What's that? Everybody has pages, Mayor? You need? Good. Anyone? There should be extra all around. Okay. Good. Ruvain, Dovi, everyone's Moshe? You have? Yisrael? You have? Good.
Everyone Galus did it 2 times, and then we...
Oh, so good. So, right. So, I'll say, so remember, we're going to have to try to figure out, by the way, the beauty of this is, what it sounds like from the Chalban, let's see. Let's go a little weiter. You're going to see, he's going to spell out some of these items.
Is there a relationship between Das Katnos and the Moichenik?
Yeah. Yes, he's essentially using those terms interchangeably. What the Zohar calls Mochin de Katnos, he calls Das de Katnos, or Katnos Hadas. I'm sorry?
So then it is a bit.
It is correct. This is his interpretation of the Zohar. I think when the Zohar speaks about Mochin de Katnos, Mochin de Gadlos, Mochin de Gadlos is quote unquote better. But the truth is, when you examine them, they're really fundamentally different. Just like Galus and Geula, which one is better? Obviously, Geula is better, but they're two fundamentally dissimilar states.
How would you define the word mochin?
Literally means thoughts. Das, moach. Correct. So we'll say, let's go weiter. She says over here as follows: Now we'll say, now remember, here's a very exciting piece. Look what the Chalban says. Ulahepech, ikar hageula hi b'shleimos hadas. See, I will say. So now remember again, whatever's going to work in one direction has to work in the opposite direction. So if the definition of galus, real galus, is galus panimi, right? Is galus panimi, is internal galus, so that you could even be sitting on the holy soil of Eretz Yisrael, but still be in a state of galus. It's all about what my das is. So that's incredible, because ulahepech, ikar ha'geula, that tells you then, they're both say, what's geula? What's geula? Whether it's geula chitzoni, what's geula chitzoni? Being Eretz Yisrael, right? But he says, but ikar ha'geula He b'shleimos hadas. So Rabbi say the ikr of geula is not external, it's internal. It's this ability to have shleimos hadas. Ke'omro al tachlis hageula, ki mala ha'aretz dea es Hashem. V'lo yilamdu od ish esreyehu, ki kulam yedu osi. Lochein. We'll say, look at this paragraph. Bottom paragraph, page Nun Hey. Lochein, Savin Hativ. Says the Chalban. Listen very carefully. I will say, when the Chalban says listen very carefully, we need to listen. She'ikr kidum hageula be'es hazos. So I will say, the ability to hasten, right? The ability to bring the geula in our times. The ikr bi'asa bepoel mamish teluyim heim b'nekudazu. Liknos as hadas shel geula mochin de gadlus. I will say, how do we bring the geula? How do we bring the geula? So the Chalban posits the only way to bring geula is ultimately to acquire the das of geula. To acquire the das of geula, mochin de gadlus, an expansive das. Now I will say, what that means, and how you do that, we have no idea yet. But at least now there's a framework. In other words, because we'll say it's just the other side of the coin. If Galus could begin while I'm in Eretz Yisrael, now this is the exciting part. If Galus could begin while I'm inside Eretz Yisrael, because Galus Panimi begins kind of when the das contracts, when the das becomes small, then ultimately, again, maybe it's possible for Geula to begin even when? Even in Galus. Maybe it's possible for Geula to begin, not to be completed. For Geula to begin, I will say, just like Galus isn't fully completed until when? Till we're exiled off the land. Geula is not complete until we get back to Eretz Yisrael. But maybe Geula could begin with Geula's Panimi, with an inner Geula, where an expansiveness of the das, an increasing of the das, Shehu habitoy hamamoshi shalis orus mishena. I will say this is the ultimate expression and manifestation of an awakening from the slumber. We spoke about again sleep and the notion of sleep, of mochin dekatnos, of a lack of spiritual awareness. Me'agolo shebedas, mimochin dekatnos, hamachzira li adam as hamochin shal iranus, mochin shal adam chai v'ra'anan, tfisas chayim shal geula. So I will say, how does geula start? Says the Chalban. Geula starts internally. Geula starts by trying to acquire the das of Geula, by trying to create a more expansive das for ourselves. How? What? When? We're going to talk about that. V'zoi has orus hamuva'as bepesach elio, uremuza bekasuv hakitzu v'ranenu shochne afar. And I will say this is the deeper taich, this is the deeper meaning of the pasuk. Hakitzu v'ranenu. Literally, wake up and rejoice. Shochne afar. What's the waking up? The waking up is find your inner das. Find your mochin de gadlos. Find your expansive das. Look for the das of geula. Even though right now I'm physically situated in galus, we could begin to look for this das. Turn the page, I will say. See, he writes, Ha'echrech lashuv la'aretz. This is the title, right? He says, Ha'echrech lashuv la'aretz v'rak la'achar mikin liknos das geula. So I will say, so now obviously the question that comes up is, can we acquire this das, this geula das, before we are physically situated in Eretz Yisrael? Can that happen? Could I essentially what it's saying is, can I begin to experience geula penimi before I begin to experience geula chitzoni? So we'll say, look what the Chalban writes, page Nun Vav. He writes, Ube'emes, af shayitzia legalus hischila be'ibur adas. So writes the Chalban something amazing. Even though halacha l'maisa, the yitzia, the galus, right, the going out to galus, began when? Be'ibur adas. We spoke about before. When does galus begin? Galus didn't begin with physical exile. Galus began already while we were situated in Eretz Yisrael, when we began to lose our das. So we'll say, by the way, isn't it an incredible thing? You know, one of the major takeaways we're going to see from this, and just even feel it now, is we often put so much emphasis on the chitzoni. Right? And I don't mean chitzoni like dress and that. I'm not talking about that. I mean chitzoni from a behavioral perspective. right? And we put, and again, and understandably so, because Lamaisa, again, Judaism is a religion of laws, right? And it's a religion of behaviors. So we often put so much emphasis and really focus on proficiency in the external and in the behavioral. But we spend so little time, sometimes, focusing on the panimi. I will say, what does it mean to have a relationship with Hashem? I want to tell you something. Today's in the day in which we live, I don't do a chasana without most times without having chasana kala go for premarital counseling, right? Why? Because the truth is, there's something very interesting in our world right now, which is people really don't fully understand relationships. I don't know what it is. I don't think that we're any better or worse than what was there. But there just seems to be something fundamentally different in the fabric of relationships contemporarily, about people's understanding about what it means to be vested in a relationship. What does it mean to love someone else? What does it mean to be there for someone else? What does it mean to sacrifice for someone else? What does that mean? What does it mean that when you're with someone in a relationship and they don't agree with you, what does it mean not to always get your way? Or never get your way, right? Right. What does that mean, and how does that look like, right? When, in all seriousness, when are you mevater, and when should you stand? It's an amazing thing. We've lost, like everyone knows, you buy a gift on an anniversary, a birthday, you do this, you do that. There, I know the behavioral stuff you have to do, but like, how as a mensch does a person engage in a relationship? And I will say, I'll tell you something. I don't know, Dr. Solomon can speak to this better than I can, but it's astounding to me how the panemius of relationship seems to, not lost, that's way too severe, but it seems to be a little bit of a forgotten art about what it means to work on something not externally, but internally. And I think we see this in Yiddishkeit also, right? We see again young people who are simply fundamentally uninspired. Fundamentally uninspired. They go through a system, right? They know all Amates Malachas, all this, Karata, lift this, but could care less about any of it. How does that happen? Right? How does that happen that a boy or girl could go through a yeshiva, Beis Yaakov, day school system, and literally not care? I know I have all the information, but it's absolutely meaningless to me. And I will say the answer is very simple. Very complex and very simple.
How he wants to answer.
Yes, Rutzi. Yeah. Everybody has their strengths. Some people are schnitzel. Right? So again, I think there are many answers. I think one of the answers is we don't focus on panemius. We don't focus on panemius. Right? How many of us who are products of the yeshiva system learned about the Ribono Shel Olam? Learned about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean? Or had a class, Relationship with God 101. What does it mean to have a relationship with your infinite Father? What does that mean? How does that look? What do you have to say? What do you have to do? How do you interact? Relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does that mean? The same way we learn how to daven, we never learn why we daven. Right? So the most important thing is you could read. Right? And today's day and age, that's an accomplishment also in a lot of the yeshivas. Right? You could read. Right? Baruch Hashem, I have Kriya skills. Good. Why are you doing it? Why is it important to do it? Why is this something that I should do 3 times a day? The panemius, I will say, is something that is so lost. It's a lost art. But understand, see, it's easy to indict. It's the system, it's the teachers, it's the this, it's the that, it's the parents, it's the this. It's much simpler. Well, so you know what it's called? You know what the loss of panemius is called? It's called galus. It's called galus. That's what galus is. Galus, we'll say, remember again, what did we learn a few weeks ago? That, right, what's the Torah of galus? What's the Torah of galus? Little review. Halacha. Dalet Amos Shel Halacha. Right, that's, because what's galus? What's Yiddishkeit? A lot of times in galus, it's what to do and how to do it. It's what it is, to a certain degree, it is a little bit relegated to the behavioral sphere. And so as a result of that, sometimes the panemius is lost. Now let's say, isn't it an incredible thing? I see this all the time. That's why you see often young men and women who are totally like out of touch with their Yiddishkeit. I went through all the motions. They go to Eretz Yisrael, and suddenly again, they love Yiddishkeit. Hello? it was in your house, like for the last 15 years, right? It was your father, your mother, your brother, your sister. Everybody's doing this. What? Because we'll say that's gullus. That's gullus. And sometimes all it takes is a little bit of a taste of gula. You don't need full gula. A little bit of a taste of gula. A little bit of a taste of panemius in order to be able to shake out of that slumber. The Hakitzu v'raninu. So it says the Chalban. He goes on, he says, V'emes af she'etzia l'galus yischila b'ibur adas shegeder v'akvosav yitzia min ha'aretz hine hageula ba'a b'seder hafuch. Kimurah v'divrei Yecheskel shehuv'u la'el shemaschil b'kinisa la'aretz ula'achar mikan ba'a hadas. So we'll say, listen to this. The Chalban posits, although he's gonna challenge this assertion as well, that although Galus begins while you're still physically in Eretz Yisrael, right? Again, I'm physically situated in the land, but Lamai said the das is eroded. He says Geula happens a different way. Geula, Chalban posits, the das only comes after you go back to Eretz Yisrael. And I will say, now don't get down on that, because we'll say the shaila is going to be who has to go back to Eretz Yisrael. Right? Is it everybody back in Eretz Yisrael? All of Am Yisrael? So again, we're going to see. But this is what the Chalban is positing. That in Geula, geography is a prerequisite, or that I say differently. The Chitzonius is a prerequisite ultimately, again, for the Panemius. Ki davar pashat u'mechuyav, shekenyeh lefi ha-seder. Lefi shi efshar liknos es hadas shel Geula, ela be'eretz Yisrael, sha'avira machkim. Because also the Chalban posits it has to be that way. Because I will say, there's something different in the air of Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara Basra, when he quotes it, that the air of Eretz Yisrael makes one wiser. Avira da'ar Yisrael machkim. So therefore, the Chalban posits that the das of Geula could only come from the geographic location. Lefichach.
Does he speak all the time about relationship or about speculative knowledge? Because now, especially now, Avira machkim, he doesn't speak about Ahavat Hashem.
Correct.
He
He's not using vacuum as an intellectual idea. Everything that he's talking about with das is on a spiritual level. So we're going to see, he's going to expound on this a little bit. Lefichach, mechuyev adavar likanes al Eretz Yisrael ula'achar mikan tavo elinu hadas ha'geula mochin de gadlus. So he says, in Geula, first there has to be a return to Eretz Yisrael, and only after there's a return to Eretz Yisrael, ultimately again, could there be mochin de gadlus? Could there be the mindset of Geula? V'hu, I want to listen to this mashal. V'hu ki dugmas hakatan she'egi lemitzvos shereishis kol margil atzmo b'maaseh mitzvos ula'achar mikan naaseh bashal ladas haTorah v'omkei mitzvos. Shabbos said the same way it is in maturation. How does it work in a child's maturation? Again, you can't start with panemius. What do you have to start with? You have to start with chitzonius. Right? You have to start with externalities, right? What is chinuch, Rabbi, when a child is young? Chinuch is all behavioral, right? Do this, behave like this. Then once the child gets older, then I can begin to give them the panemius. Ki beliki yumam I efshar lahaskil onkam. Shabbos say what the Chalban, the nimshal, right? So the mashal is that the same way the child has to first approach things behaviorally, and then the understanding, the emotion, the das comes later on. The Chalban posits in Geula it's the same thing. First, we have to get back to Eretz Yisrael. I need the framework of Eretz Yisrael. I need the physicality of Eretz Yisrael. Once I have that, then the process of Geula could occur. He says, Kina davar binyanenu. Here he says, it is impossible to fully appreciate the depth and the profundity of Geula and all of its light without entering into Eretz Yisrael. Makom ha-Geula obeis ha-kibol lahashpa oseha. Because I will say, what is Eretz Yisrael? Eretz Yisrael is the place of Geula, and I will say this lashon is so beis hakibul lahashpa. So I will say, you're never going to see more beautiful terminology. Basically, the Eretz Yisrael is the receptacle for all of the shefa, the flow of blessing of Geula. Eretz Yisrael is the only kli, it's the only utensil for this. Lefichach sibava hanhaga al yona la'avienu artza. Shabbos say, therefore, the Chalban says, Shabbos say, here's the amazing part. So remember, the Chalban is not saying that all of Am Yisrael has to return to Eretz Yisrael in order for the process of Geula to occur, or to begin, I should say. He's saying just Am Yisrael, in some significant representation, has to begin the process of return. Once that happens, the physical framework of Geula is activated. And once the physical framework of Geula is activated, then what? Then the Pnimius of Geula could begin to occur as well. And that's why it writes, Lefichach, Sivava, Han-Hagal, Yonah Lebeinu Arza. Therefore, again, through the Hashkach of Hashem, we have begun to return to Eretz Yisrael. V'higia ha'am beli dea gidola urechava. And I must remember again, who were the people who were responsible for the modern day Yishuv, right? For the modern day habitation of Eretz Yisrael? It wasn't people of great spiritual depth, right? It wasn't people with great Pnimius. It wasn't people with das, right? Mochin de gadlus, he says, but that's okay. That's okay. They started the process by allowing us to inhabit the land. They ultimately created the framework. And therefore, again, lahavinu lahaskil omek mashmaos hashiva la'aretz. V'rak la'achar mikan tavo ruach Hashem lefhaim ba'am. Sibbo say, after Am Yisrael begins to inhabit Eretz Yisrael, then the spirit of the Ribono Shel Olam can begin to exist within the Klal. Ula holid bo es hadea ha'amitis ha'miva'eres es mashmaos chayenu v'darkenu be'eretz Yisrael u'begeula ha'shalema. Shabbat say, isn't this absolutely incredible? So as much as we've always been trying to say that Galus and Gula are two sides of the same coin, they're not. I mean, they are, but they're not. The processes are fundamentally different. That whereas Galus could begin even when we are physically situated in Eretz Yisrael, you could be in Galus and be in Eretz Yisrael, because Galus begins with the breakdown of the Das, the breakdown of the Pnimi, not the breakdown of the Chitzoni. Geula, says the Chalban, could only occur when Am Yisrael returns to Eretz Yisrael. The framework, ultimately again, of Eretz Yisrael is fundamentally necessary in order to restart the process of Ge'ulas Penimi. But says the Chalban, once that happens, once Am Yisrael returns to Eretz Yisrael in some measurable way, then ultimately again, says the Chalban, the Ruach Hashem begins to beat inside of the nation. And I will say what we're going to see is something amazing. When it says it begins to beat inside of the nation, who does that cover? Who's in the nation? Who's in the nation? Everyone, including who? Even the people in Galus, right? Even what? What was that?
It's the woman of the wall.
Even them, every Jew, right? Every Jew. They're not going to. It's okay. Thank you. Well, if you sit up front, there's like a certain level of restraint, you know. So when that Shechina, right, when the Ruach Hashem begins to beat within the heart of Klal Yisrael, it begins to beat within the heart of every single Jew, which means that even the Jew who is geographically in Galus, ultimately again could begin to feel Geula HaPanimi, could begin to feel ultimately again this redemptive process beginning to flourish, beginning to occur, the Mochin, the Gadlus sprouting inside of him. So maybe we'll sing one more song before Mariv. We'll stop here, Rabbosai. So next week is Purim. We're going to have the shir. We're having this. Many of us are having this Suda here. So again, at some point in time, come. I'm going to bring my Chalban with me. Right?
Ellie has no playing on foreign policy.
No playing on foreign policy. All right, it's fine. We'll play something.
I'll try to make it.
Right. Rules are only there for 1 week.
Good. So Mirat Hashem. So we're going to continue in some form in Mirat Hashem on Purim night next week in Mirat Hashem.
Shana
L'chaim, a good Erev Shabbos to everyone. Freilich and Purim.
Big time out. Big time.
Big time out. See, no, you time out tomorrow? Huh?
I hope so.
Oh, okay.
That's my goal.
Huge favor.